Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, we will hear from cybersecurity experts as they discuss strategies to reduce the attack surface of government agencies and get a leg up on attackers and exploits. My name is Kirsten Patton. I'm the program manager here at ATARC, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's webinar. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we are a nonprofit that provides collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We also provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to thank you all, our attendees, for being here today, and ATARC would also like to give a special thanks to our partners at Palo Alto for helping us put together today's webinar. Before we begin, I just want to encourage the audience to please submit questions of their own in the Q&A section of this platform down below. And also, if you're interested in receiving CPE credits for attending today's event, make sure that you answer all of the polls as they come up throughout the session. So to kick things off, I'm going to ask for each of our panelists, please introduce yourselves, who you are, what agency you're with, what your role is there, and anything else that you'd like to share with our audience up top. Now would be the time. Let's start with Ariel, please.
Well, thank you. I am honored to be here today. So this is my first panel discussion in a while, so it's exciting. But as mentioned, I'm Ariel Bain. I'm a cybersecurity advisor and also a cyber state coordinator for CISA, and that stands for the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency. And so what we do is we are essentially trying to enhance and build the resilience of critical infrastructure around our nation. And so critical infrastructure, if you think about it, it's like our transportation systems, our energy systems, our healthcare systems, and things so essential to our nation, right? That if anything happens to them, then there'll be effect on our way of life. So that's what we do at CISA. As a cybersecurity advisor, we are regionalized. So I'm in Region 3 and I cover primarily Delaware and Philadelphia. And we are the boots on the ground for the organization. So we go out to critical infrastructure owners and operators and also representative sites, and we assess their cybersecurity. We have everything from preparedness activities such as assessments from a strategic level all the way down to a very technical level. We also provide tabletop exercises, training, and workshops, and we tailor things for our different stakeholders and our partners. We also have assistance after the boom, right, or after an incident, where we provide incident response and also incident coordination. So there's many different services. I'm really just touching the surface of what we do as a cybersecurity advisor and also as an agency. And even though I represent for cybersecurity, we have equivalent PSAs or protective security advisors, which help protect critical infrastructure from a physical security aspect. And all of the things I'll talk about today and typically do in my work, they are free and usually voluntary. So when we come up with options for you, they are just options for consideration. You don't have to comply at all. And again, voluntary, right? So, and we also protect your information. But that's just a little bit about myself, and I think you'll learn a little bit more as we go on during the day.
Thank you, Ariel. That was great. And let's pass it over to William next.
Hello, my name is William Welch. I'm a senior advisor for cybersecurity here at the Department of Energy. I picked up this role about 6 months ago. For this, I was the Health Sector Cybersecurity Coordination Center cyber engagement lead. So my job was to actually go out and build the public-private partnerships. A lot of the way that Ariel works in building that, we only focused on the healthcare and public health sector. So we knew a lot of our region and state CSAs and had a lot of fun with them. But we didn't have a lot of the authority and a lot of power they did. So we worked very narrow in scope and what we did. As part of that, though, a lot of great opportunity to speak with industry leaders and it's funny when you go to talk to an organization that has a budget, a cybersecurity budget that's bigger than your entire IT budget, because private sectors and they want to protect their IP or they want to protect financial data or things like that. And it was always interesting to go talk to those folks and like, I don't need you, you need me kind of thing, and build those relationships was always a great time. But now over here at DOE, I'd say it's a lot of the same. It's relationship building, understanding what the needs are of the national labs, what the needs are of the PMAs, the power management authorities, what the needs are of other sub-organizations inside of DOE, as well as headquarters, really, advocate for those needs and make sure that my boss knows exactly what she needs to say, and make sure that she has the proper information so that she can, have those things. And I support the CISO and the deputy CISO and making sure that they, have coverage for, there's only so many classified meetings they can sit in. So how can I help them out? Make sure I can sit in something, back brief them, take a little load off their plate, as well as, other activities across, the headquarters OCIO level. It's a interesting challenge being in this role, though, because I have all this, scope and span, and I can look at absolutely everything, but I have no authority to go out and buy something or do, purchase or put a contract in place to make sure we get something fixed. I'm really just the advocate of, hey, we should do something about this, and how do we get there? How do we build that relationship, and how do we build that trust of getting there and making sure that we have, put something into place to fix issues. But again, I have the fun job of, I get to go around to everyone else and see where all the problems are and how we can fix them and maybe what we can do to help. So it's a fun time. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Let's jump over to Chris next.
Good afternoon, Kristen and panelists and everyone else on the call. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Again, just like Ariel, it's been a while since I've participated in one of these panels. I do like to talk about not what I do, but what my team does and what we do here at CMS. It's pretty phenomenal. So I'm the group director. I am not the singer of Coldplay, by the way. That's an old joke. But I am the group director in the Office of Financial Management for the Financial Management Systems Group. We oversee several critical systems within the Office of Financial Management. One of them is the system of record, the financial system of record for CMS. And CMS stands for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. We're an operating division at HHS. And that one of the systems, which is the financial system of record, as I just mentioned, is the Oracle Financial System High Glass, which accounts for about, last year we had outlays of $1.4 trillion in healthcare outlays for Medicare, as well as Medicaid and Affordable Care Act, and as well as contract services to keep the lights on. We also have Hyperion, which is our budget formulation execution system. We have our own identity management system that controls the access rules for our systems. And we also embarked on recently in the past year, piloting Tableau, and rolled out Tableau as well, and some other reporting tools. In my group, specifically what we do, we are one stop. We do make, unlike William, when you made a comment about making decisions and procuring, we do everything within our shop, in our group, from laying out the specific requirements for managing, maintaining, and operating all of the critical mission essential financial systems, budget systems for CMS. We control everything. I report directly to the CFO and then up to the COO. And we do not have the reporting structure to like the CIO or CTO. Within my group, we also have our own security division, and that division is accountable and responsible for the oversight of the entire security operations and infrastructure for our application. We have a contractor that manages and assists us with the everything else that we do to manage and operate and maintain our environment and our financial systems and everything else. So with that said, it's a very interesting. We're always on 24/7. Like I said, $1.4 trillion is what we accounted for last year, and we continue to grow.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chris. And Bruce, we'll hear from you next, please.
Good morning. Good afternoon. I guess some folks are probably on the other side of the world too. It's a pleasure to meet you all. My name is Bruce Himbery. I am the Field Chief Technology Officer for the Cortex division of Palo Alto Networks. So I have a colleague on the inside that's making sure our developers are all using the same, let's call it development syntax for our coding infrastructure. And then I maintain the relationships that we have with the defense and the intelligence and law enforcement community and our other development partners worldwide. It's a engaging opportunity to do the work that helps Palo Alto build what we build. Within Cortex, we are building the machine learning, we are building the automation, we're using the endpoint, building the endpoint defense, the threat intelligence, basically all of the connective tissue that makes the SOC at Palo Alto Networks work. And then downstream from us and our SOC, we're touching, oh gosh, probably over 1 billion people at this point. I guess it's been a long journey. I've been with Palo Alto now about 5 years, but I come from the information warfare community, the United States Air Force. And I used to run the operations for the digital crimes unit at Microsoft. If you've ever heard of Conficker or Citadel or Rustock or Bamatol or Emotet, or here just in the last 2 weeks, Zloader, that was my group. We were 7 ex-military personnel, primarily ex-military personnel, looking at the way that nation states and organized crime threat actors were building their ecosystems. And then we would exploit the vulnerabilities in those systems to seize them and take them down. We were always partnered with the Secret Service or the FBI or Interpol or Scotland Yard, but the goal was to make the internet a better place. That is a substantial mandate. Now, my mandate now is to make sure that we are efficiently defending Palo Alto at scale. That is probably one of the most important things I've ever had to really conceptualize, is looking at how we are updating and defending, oh gosh, literally millions of firewalls around the world and in real time. And it's not a trivial event. It's challenging.
Thank you all for those introductions. I want to pose our first question to kick things off, but just as another reminder to the audience, like I said at the beginning, please submit questions as we go. So the first question is, let's talk about some of the latest emerging cyber threats that you're seeing. And to tie into that is the second question about some of the most effective tactics for proactively protecting agency operations against such threats. I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and then we'll hear from Ariel after that. Chris is on mute.
My apologies. Sorry. So we are not a internet-facing system. So we're housed on-prem behind all kinds of firewalls. So we're not internet-facing. We do have, and we're probably going to talk about the supply chain, and that's the key piece of. I think Ariel's going to be talking about that. But one of the instances or events that we experienced was with SolarWinds when that was announced about 1.5 years ago. And that example that I'm going to talk about was a very eye-opening experience for us, because SolarWinds is very critical piece into identifying and seeing, providing the visibility in terms of what is going on in our entire environment. With that said, when my technical director was notified and also found out immediately on that Sunday night, Monday morning, what transpired, he immediately assembled his security team, federal and contractor team, and within a matter of, I would like to say minutes, but I think it was probably within 1.5 hours, 2 hours, immediately shut down all of the SolarWinds processing. And then we immediately reached out, received the guidance, followed the guidance from CISA, and worked closely with our contractor who oversees the operations and maintenance of our environment and systems, as well as coordinated closely with the CMS security teams and HHS. Formulated that team immediately, created a chain of command cadence in terms of who's going to report when. So because it's always helter-skelter, what's going on, I need information, and we didn't want any disinformation. So that team executed, wanted to identify what that impact was for us, what versions, and gather the necessary information that we then moved through this process. What was really interesting to see how quickly and responsive SolarWinds was, along with our team, and how the flow of information was going back and forth. And it was very useful information. So as I mentioned earlier, that cadence of information, the status that came back to me every 3 to 6 hours, and then I was able to disseminate that and take that up to my chain of command, kept them at ease. Within 4 days, we even had the SolarWinds leadership, as well as their senior technical team meet with us virtually via Zoom and provide an overview within that 1 hour meeting in terms of what was going on, what that impact was, and whether or not we were actually impacted based on the version of SolarWinds we were running and the other versions that we were looking at potentially upgrading. And it was determined on day 4 that there was absolutely no impact to us, which was a relief. However, we continued, we didn't let our guard down. During those 4 days when my technical director shut everything down, we resorted back to running scripts to continue with the overall monitoring our environment to guarantee, ensure that we had no bad actors and or things that we were aware of that may have not been normal operational types of activities occurring in our environment. That continued on for roughly about a month, every day, continuing with the cadence. We never let our guard down. And then when the decision came back through the various guidance protocols, whether or not we would like to do a upgrade to our current SolarWinds software to get that back up in production or do a fresh install, we made an educated decision to do a fresh install. And then we were back up and running and everything was, we have not had any issues yet, but that playbook that we executed against and having the open communication across the federal team, the contractor team that is currently now still supporting us in our operations and maintenance, as well as with SolarWinds, is vital and critical to the overall success to ensure that we were not only compliant, but also not negatively impacted with this, and reinsured and reinstilled the faith that we were doing the right thing. But what I'm getting at is that don't withhold information. Don't hold information hostage, because that information is vital and critical at every point in time to make life-threatening decisions, I would say, because we had to get the payments out the door. $1.4 trillion is a lot of money that we account for.
Absolutely. Ariel.
Yeah, so I like that example that you used, Chris. Definitely, I think the supply chain integrity is really an emerging threat as we're seeing it, because everything is connected, right? And not only that, when before things get to, federal agencies, it's being touched by many hands. It's being touched by the developers, the manufacturers, right? Testers and evaluators. Then it goes to resellers. So all those hands, you can't manage the integrity of your systems. And when it comes to SolarWinds, right? It's people are going after the crown jewels. They aren't going after individual federal agencies. They're going after the crown jewel, which is our managed services. So that way, instead of having access to one organization, you have access to tons. So I really like that example you used. I would say what I'm saying is I won't focus on the specific threats like Log4j, which we've seen widely, out there, or the different SolarWinds vulnerabilities, but kind of a roll up of what I'm saying. Because everything is connected to the internet, we have our bridges, we have our water treatment facilities, our hospitals, everything is connected to the internet. You can actually go into the Apple store today if you want it, and you could buy a coffee mug that connects to the internet. And so because everything now is connected to the internet, right? What are we looking at? The consequences are no longer just loss of finances, loss of reputation. It's now potentially loss of life, and really things playing out in our physical environment. And I'll give a very timely example of that. So with these geopolitical tensions right now, we know that Russia knows that, or looks at it as cyber being an acceptable practice for getting what they want, right? And so back in December 2015, there was actually, China always does this. They always target critical infrastructure because that's what they, use for cyber warfare. But back in December 2015, so there was an attack on Ukraine, which was based off of the Black Energy malware, and over 230,000 residents of Ukraine were without electricity. So people don't think why is electricity, you may have like a power outage at home, but what about all those people that don't have power and don't have generators? You know, people could be stuck in an elevator, right? That's potential loss of life. Hospital equipment relies on energy. The water sector, how do you think water is pumped out of ground? It's also with electricity. And a lot of systems sometimes aren't built with that resilience in mind. So I like to look at it that way. I think the roll up of it is there's now cyber physical impacts, which have really cascading effects that can affect our overweight way of life. So I like to just put that there.
Yeah, thank you for both of you for sharing those examples. And I'm about to call for our first poll question. Actually, I'll just go ahead and say, we can pop that up on the screen. But before we respond to that, or while our audience responds to that, is there anything else from the panelists that resonates that they'd like to comment on before we move on to our next series of questions? Bruce?
Yeah, I'm glad to share our story of SolarWinds. So we were SolarWinds customers, and they did try to operationalize on us. So this was a significant time before the FireEye breach was made public. We caught it based on its behavior. We defend Palo Alto using a series of machine learning tools that are behavioral based. We don't want to have to rely on hashes or signatures, any of that old school stuff. It all comes down to the way that something behaves. So we caught it, and for us, SolarWinds was right at 6 seconds, but it was the digitally signed nature of that executable trying to do something that was unusual. That was a significant wake-up call. And now we did notify SolarWinds, and there was a process there that we observed. But I don't think most organizations want to believe that their security has been compromised to that degree. So we started looking at it forensically. And this particular threat actor had even taken the time to match the function naming convention and capitalization syntax that they were using in their source code. That is extremely unusual. Having been on the offensive side, that takes work, it takes time, it takes dedication, and they were looking for a long-term persistency. It's very difficult to stop something like that. So it was the kind of breach that we are focused on internally, making sure that does not happen for us or our customers. That is where we live, is looking at behavior. And it has been a strong validation of that technique to use our defenses the way that we're currently using them in that manner.
Thank you, Bruce. Ariel, did you want to comment?
I was just gonna say, and I really like this SolarWinds, example too, because as I was talking about these, geopolitical tensions, the threat actor there was also Russia. So it's kind of like it's full circle. But that's something that we're dealing with today. Geopolitical tensions right now are very high. And so all organizations, I would say, should do the minimum, to be proactive at protecting their systems. We actually have a Shields Up webpage on the CISA.gov website, which I think everyone, regardless of any demographic, should look at today.
Thank you all. And William, I would like to hear from you next on most common threat vectors, because I know you have some ideas you'd like to share.
Absolutely. So throughout my 12 years in IT security, I will say that the number one threat vector has not changed. It's email. We have put in filters and blocks, and we pay out the nose for different types of security. It doesn't stop some random body just opening up their web browser and going to Gmail and clicking a link, downloading something, and luckily we have there are tools in place that hopefully are blocking that. But as Bruce mentioned earlier, if you have an attacker that is really focused, really motivated, and has the resources, they find a way in. And so if I'm one of the things that I've always seen is it's not the red team or the quote unquote hackers sitting out on the outside that are sitting there scanning your environment, sitting there fuzzing an application, brute forcing their way in or something like that. It's much easier if I just go to your LinkedIn profile, or if I go to your Facebook or Twitter or Twitch, or what is the new one, the dancing one, TikTok. That's it. If I go to your TikTok and see that you really like a certain kind of music, next thing I know, I'm sending you concert invites to go, hey, free tickets or reduced price tickets. I can get you to click on anything if I know enough about you, right? So And it doesn't take long with how much folks are putting out on social media, and especially if I can follow you, if you have a TikTok or something like that. So now, luckily, most of us are boring here in government, and we don't have a lot of these. So it's great that, that protects us, security through obscurity in that regard. But again, a lot of us have Facebooks, Twitters, Twitches, things like that. And there's enough information out there. And we do have really good tools now in government that block a lot of that income. If someone clicks a link, we're obviously going to see it. We're going to block it. We're going to make sure that it doesn't go through, and it probably isn't even going to pop up on one of our sensors because it was blocked well before at the edge or somewhere else. And that's part of the great work that our firewall vendors do, and that's part of the great work that our MSPs do to provide that type of service, so that our SOCs don't get bogged down with that type of low level alert. But it's, going back to that persistent threat, it's going back to that guy that really crafted his message, that really built, a unique toolkit, or not even a unique toolkit, but a unique way in, and he's using that to pivot through a network, and maybe using a known toolkit that just we don't have enough goo inside of our network that we're not seeing it, or they may just be, it is a new toolkit, we've never seen it, or it's a commercial toolkit that we were using with our red teams or purple teams or whatever we had running internally that we knew was there, and now it's pivoting through. So part of this is really going back to understanding what does a normal day's network traffic kind of look like, right? So when I was at HHS and now here at DOE, there's a lot of open science work that happens. And we saw, massive, like a couple of nation states basically download our entire, healthcare database out of NIH and all of the stuff out of DOE that is open science on a daily basis. They just download everything, because why not just have the data? Whether it's good data, bad data, they don't care. They're just downloading everything that they can get their hands on. And when it comes to that, we understand that there's a lot of data exfilling our network, but we know exactly where it's coming from. We know why, where it's going, how it's going, what that data is from, when it was last updated, what, things that are there. So the next thing I see, going to a different part of this, if I see a brand new open FTP server and all of a sudden data is being exfilled from that, and I'm seeing that on one of our firewalls, I can immediately, that is an anomaly. That is not the norm, right? Especially if it's going to one of these, possibly adversary nation states, or even a friendly state, because, adversaries don't just use adversary networks. They, use a lot of friendly networks. And so how do I, tell if it's coming from, France or Brazil or, Nicaragua or something like that? How do I actually know that they're downloading something good, where it could be a CDC researcher out there downloading something that they need, or a DOE, a fossil energy person out, just trying to help with climate, carbon capture and things like that. How do we make sure that they're getting, the support they need, and how do we make sure that we're stopping the bad guys from possibly exfilling, nuclear data or something like that? And so that's really where understanding what your network does on a normal basis and how it's performing, and how, what is that edge actually look like? What does that, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm. I saw Bruce and then Chris.
Sure. I mentioned earlier that I focus on our SOC a great deal, and currently making sure that we do not have something that becomes a source of a supply chain compromise for our customers downstream is a very big focus for that. Most of the time, things like what we've seen, what Bill was just talking about, it takes days for orgs to find that out, or hours. And it is not trivial to find something at the volume of something like the Department of Energy is going to be looking at. You're looking at probably, I'm guessing, millions of alerts per day. It's just, it's unsustainable for a human to have that scope of awareness, to be able to put that together and do something with it. And that is very challenging for traditional enterprise to do something with. So we focused on the way that we were doing our detection. Currently, we are handling right at 500 billion alerts per month. And I do that with 10 analysts. Those 10 analysts are currently maintaining a 10-second detection and 1-minute response. That is only possible by the efficient application of machine learning and automation. Without that, the humans would be overwhelmed in literally seconds. And it is such a critical role to be taking the data, like what Bill was talking about, and doing something with it and becoming effective at the scale that your enterprise generates its noise. That noise is so prevalent. And on the offensive side, we lived within that noise. We needed that noise. It was critical to the success of our campaign of what we were trying to accomplish. So that's the way we defend.
Yeah. And from where I sit, and I'm not in the technical weeds as the entire team is, from the developers, the security operations team, monitoring everything and all the different tools, monitoring the network, the operations. It's incredible. And I just would like to echo what William and both of you said, Bruce. And to sum it up, you need to know your environment and being able to understand what normal operations looks like is what I'm trying to sum this up to. And knowing how those tools are configured for the purpose of what they need to look for, so that the analyst can quickly identify a typical type of behavior and then take the appropriate actions, because you can have false positives and not spend too much time looking over here while the bad actors are over here hacking in, taking data. And one example of one of the tools that we have on our contractors have for data loss, to detect data loss prevention, is, and this was totally foreign, new to me as well, that our contractor had this data prevention tool on their laptops. The scenario was they deactivated that tool. They connected to the Google Drive, performed an upload, download, and then reconnected. And then the tool, the data prevention loss tool, reactivated and sent the log file back to the mothership, the company's security team. They immediately alerted my security team and said, we noticed that there was some abnormal behavior, because that is, again, we knew our environment. They know their environment. They said, this is abnormal behavior because we do not necessarily have or permit people to connect to the Google Drive. Fast forward, appropriate action was taken. User was contacted and we resolved the issue. But it is really critical. And like you said, there is just so much going on. There's so many different changes, configuration changes within your application. We're adding new code, as Ariel pointed out. Dealing with third-party tools are constantly touched, modified, enhanced. Extensions are added on. Who knows? But as if you have then a solid configuration management chain, and you have, and we'll get into one of the other follow-up questions, a way to be able to have that single lens and understanding of your operations, security, network, and being able to pull that out and identify with the limited amount of staff that you have and rely on your tools. But again, that gets to people, processes, and technology, which we'll get into later. But thank you.
Uh-oh, is she frozen or am I frozen?
Can you hear me? I couldn't hear you, so maybe it was me. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just want
Yes.
to chime in too, because so I'm so far. Is that me? Because Chris, can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay. So I'm so far removed from, okay, I'm so far removed from being, technical and hands-on. I definitely agree that email is one of the most common attack vectors, but I kind of want to roll it up to social engineering. The reason why a lot of phishing attacks work, or what we now know as smishing, where people are sending text messages with fake URLs, or vishing, where now they're trying to fish out information over voice. The reason why this is successful is because people are putting this information out, right? It's being released. Sometimes it's on the dark web, but there's a thing called doxing where, people are following executives' Facebook messages or Facebook posts so that they can see where they're going. I can give you two examples of where phishing was successful. The one big event was a business email compromise. It was an executive, and he was a coach of his son's football team. Actually, I think it was baseball, but sports team, it's tomato. But so he posted pictures and he was very engaged. An attacker got a hold of this, and actually he pretended to be like a high person from like the football league. And he convinced him to send money because he thought that he had that connection with him. So they lost out on over $1 million, right? All because of him posting his whereabouts. And it's not that you can't post your whereabouts, because you do want to make sure that your friends and your family have access to you and know what's going on, but you have to be careful that you don't, play on emotions when you get emails or text messages from others. I know something else that happened. The funny thing is, it ended up being a penetration test going wrong, but there was an organization that got an email what they thought was from their MSP, but it was like 2 letters that were changed, called typo squatting. And 2 letters were changed, and it was actually a potential attacker that went to their site. He hooked up a Raspberry Pi, and if anybody knows what a Raspberry Pi, it can do a lot of damage. It's essentially like a removable device that can be programmed with malware. They allowed this person to come on site, and they plugged this Raspberry Pi up into their SCADA systems. These are their control systems. Now, just imagine if this was not a penetration test, what could have went wrong? So that's just kind of how intense social engineering in email can be.
Yeah, that's wild. All right. Do any of our other panelists have anything they'd like to, share before we move on to the next question? But also, if our events team could please post poll number 2, we're going to go ahead and knock that one out. All right. Do you have an immediate need for an attack surface management solution? Please go ahead and respond to that. All right. Moving right along. Let's see. Let's hear from, well, Ariel, I know that you were open to responding to this next question about achieving a comprehensive, unified view of network activity to scan for threats. And I know we just touched on that a little bit as well, but anything else that you'd like to share with us here around unified view of network activities?
I just say, asset management, a lot of times we look at what our physical controls are, our technical controls. I think holistically, I'm a big person. This is kind of what I do. I'm an influencer, so I think big picture. But it's a big upfront investment. But asset management of your facilities, your people, your information, and your data, they are paramount to doing every other activity. Every other activity, such as your configuration management, your risk management, your incident response, all of those things are a cornerstone of good asset management. Asset management can be done in an automated fashion. It can be done on a managed basis, or it can be done, manually for smaller organizations. But I think that's a really good starting point for any organization to have really good asset management practice from a policy, a procedures, and also a guideline standpoint.
Thank you. And Bruce, coming from industry, I'd like to hear your perspective on that as well.
Probably the best way to put this is we've done 17 acquisitions within the last 3.5 years. And the most expensive one was a company called Expanse. It cost us just over $750 million. And the reason we did that is because we needed to know what we looked like from the outside. We need to understand what our attack surface looks like for not only us, it is also the people that we do business with. It is the people that are our employees. We need to understand if our employees, if their ISP has left their cable modem administrative interface open and exposed to the outside world. We can then notify the employee, hey, you need to work with your ISP and get this fixed. But more than that, we key automation against it. So when we have a detection event where we have a firewall engineer that changes something and it exposes a server to the outside that has a CVE that has yet to be patched, we want to key automation against that so that someone or something, specifically something, steps in and does something about it at low latency. We can't have something dwelling out there, festering, waiting for someone to compromise it. And by far, the biggest attack surface inside the cloud is a misconfiguration. Almost every single time, it is a misconfiguration. So when you're scanning yourself and looking at what you look like from the outside, you can understand when one of your developers makes a change that exposes something to the outside that should not be exposed. Then when you become more mature with it, you can even start automation against it. That's what we do.
Chris, go ahead.
I absolutely agree with that. And also, but I'm not really aware that there's really one single solution or tool that will capture everything. But I do believe that there are a suite of tools that one could integrate with an event management system, and that could be configured and managed by a team of experts that eventually, or that who understands the overall technical environment as well as the capabilities of each of these different tools, that then will eventually assist the automatic detection and the prioritization of any potential security issues or false positives that come up that need to be analyzed. What I was mentioning earlier regarding, we have tools that monitor our operations, we have tools that monitor our network operations, and we have tools that monitor the security pieces. So knowing which tools to use, how to configure them, and the teams that understand, your infrastructure, your network, your database, your software suites, everything, that your entire environment, your ecosystem. And now not going to then each different system and getting those different reports, but putting that into, and we use ServiceNow, and I'm not advertising, or I'm not, saying each of these tools, you need to figure that out yourself. We went through this journey of trial and error, which tool will be best in finding out what works. But ServiceNow is that single view. Everything feeds into ServiceNow, and that provides us with that lens into our entire environment. We also we have automated some of these systems tools, auto-generate events, so that the analyst or technician can go in and view it, do their forensic scientific analysis, and come back and say, yeah, good to go, no. And also all tickets, either tickets by end users, are logged into ServiceNow. And therefore we can create that correlation to see, as we were talking earlier, you have third parties touching different software tools, this, that, and the other. So we can then see, is it really a false positive, or did somebody else monkey with that particular software tool? And how do we determine whether or not we need to prioritize and address that particular issue? But again, SolarWinds and Oracle Enterprise Manager, they're configured to go feed into ServiceNow, ExtraHop, the Palo Alto for our network operations, Splunk, Trend Micro, Tripwire, they all feed into part of our security monitoring tools, feed into ServiceNow. And that's our solution. But in my lifetime, I don't see one tool being able to accomplish everything. And then you always have to look at the upgrades, test them, making sure that you just need to understand your environment and have the tools to again, that gets back to the people, processes, technology, and making sure you have a fine equilibrium between all three.
Yeah, thank you all for your responses. So William, I want to start with you on my next question, and that's, what role does staff training play in keeping network operations safe?
I think keeping staff trained is absolutely one of the biggest things we can do. Education is key in everything from understanding, what does a malicious link look like? What does a malicious sender look like in an email, right? There's not always a perfect, hover your mouse over this and it's going to look, look right or wrong, or maybe it shows up right or wrong in Outlook or whatever email service you may be using. But, user education on what is normal behavior, what are things they need to be looking out for? How can they be looking out for them? Things like that is really key, as well as, in the federal government, we have records management, retention requirements and other things. And so if someone is, thinks that something may have happened that was malicious and accidentally deletes it, or deletes something that wasn't malicious but has a records requirement, there are other considerations, that go into the user training versus just the cybersecurity piece. But at the end of the day, if the user doesn't know what to do with anything, or with an event, or with something that's happening on their machine, or something that's happening on their phone even, or something else, all that is, I can tell you now, my work iPhone VPNs in, and then I use, all of my tools internally. I'm not, they're containerized applications, but I'm actually inside of the DOE domain, inside of the DOE boundary. So what happens if something happens on my work iPhone and it starts pivoting through again? It goes back to that. How can a user tell that it's doing something wrong? How can a user, identify that it's something that we need to address? How can a user, look at that and just say, I need to update this? And it comes through awareness and education. And so awareness is, hey, make sure you're patching your OS, make sure you're doing this, make sure you're turned on your machine so it can get these updates, make sure it's getting this. Those are things that we can, obviously throw alerts up in front of a user to make sure they're getting those, right? I get them all the time of, hey, make sure your machine's turned on between these hours and you're going to get an update. Or, hey, the time and records keeping system is going to get an update at this time. Make sure you're not logged into it because it could break your time card. And so there's ways that we can show that. Those don't actually require education. That's nothing that we have to go out and teach. But something that we do need to teach is, how can I recognize a bad sender? Or how do I recognize a phishing email? And a lot of those things Ariel mentioned earlier is, how do I recognize that and why, right? So if you put everything into plain text and I can see all your links, then of course it's gonna be pretty easy. But how many people want to look at plain text email? Not very many people do. And I can tell you that, myself included, when I'm sending emails, I don't want them in plain text. I want my nice, pretty formatted pictures. I want everything to go with it. I want my signature block to look, nice and neat. So I don't, as a user who wants, certain types of functionality, I'm not going to sacrifice security for it. So how do I recognize that those things are wrong? And how do we make sure that, how do we make sure that things are addressed and that users know what to click, what not to click, when to raise the alarm, when to raise the alerts? Chris had a great example of that. And so that all comes back to user training.
Thank you, William. Did any of our other panelists want to respond?
I wanted to just add a little bit. So we always hear this saying, people are the weakest link as far as it comes to cybersecurity, but I also think they are the strongest asset to organizations, right? Because Chris and Bruce hit on a lot of tools. Like, what is a Palo Alto tool if a person is not trained on tuning it, if a person is not trained on upgrading it? It's just a tool. So I think, especially for privileged users, that training needs to be not just a one-time thing, around, once a year thing where they're doing this annual refresher of what it means to be secure. And I also think that it's so paramount that organizations really need to adopt programs around training that empower people to report things, to empower them to do good things, but also recognize them. When I worked at the FTC, phishing was such an integral part of what we did that we got our chairwoman at the time involved, and she actually wrote letters to folks who were not compliant and failing exercises. So it should really be a culture. Training should be really a culture, but I think that there should be a really big focus on people who can do damage to the network, such as privileged users.
Thank you,
I'd
Ariel.
just like to I'd like to just sum it up that it's not, management leadership needs to support this. And we are also accountable, just like the staff, everyone else. We can put all the tools into place to protect our systems, but the staff and everybody, we all need to understand and convey the message. We all are accountable for this as well, just like they are when they go home. They need to understand they protect the security of their bank accounts, their financial institutions, their health care records, their privacy. That just because we're issuing laptops and access to our systems, they also need to understand that they own and they have the responsibility to protect the information on those systems to do their jobs as well. And it's vital to the overall protection of our jobs and the information we protect. And it's basic hygiene in terms of and etiquette as part of the job. And we're not, it's not there to punish people. It's there to ensure the integrity of the data that we're protecting and working with.
I'll chime in here. One thing that we have focused on doing is making sure we do not create a fear culture inside of Palo Alto Networks. That fear culture will lead employees and individuals to hide things and not tell anyone. And that is the last possible thing that you want to happen in an environment, in our experience. It's the mandate of everyone involved to both manage sideways with the personnel that are around you, but also manage up, help them understand that you are reporting something because you genuinely wanted to make sure that someone saw it and knew about it and that you surfaced it. And you don't want to do that and have the fear of retribution inside you. That's the last thing you really need.
I love that, Bruce.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to go ahead and pop up our third and final poll question, and we also have an audience question that we're going to respond to. So we can go ahead and put that up on the screen. And our audience question is from an ATARC friend, Jim Kovac. Hey there. In regards to application security, 2021 had record-breaking zero-day hacking attacks. How are the panelists strategizing around securing or shrinking that attack vector? And Bruce, I saw that you were interested in responding to this one. So do you want to go ahead and get started?
Certainly. The way that we focus on supply chain has everything to do with behavior. We don't use hashes, we don't use signatures, we are looking at behavior. And behavior has helped us because even if they compromise an application, they still have to do something with it. They have to have attack against a target. They have to try to exfil data, they have to try to get to something. And the behavior that the threat actor uses is always indicative of what they're trying to do. And if you do that at scale and you do it efficiently, then you wind up with a system that is much like what we are currently using to defend us. We wind up with a system where we find a threat actor using a new technique, and we end up then later on having to go back and retroactively assign the CVE to that once it is discovered. So we see the behavior that they're doing, we figure out that it's malignant, we stop it, and then we come back later on and we find that we are assigning a CVE that has been discovered and assigned later on. That's where we're at now with behavioral analysis of a specific application or a specific user. This came to us very recently. A customer of ours in the Middle East found a threat actor had used 3 0 days to establish and maintain persistency inside their network. We found it in the very first day of being installed in their network because we were using behavioral analytics versus traditional detection mechanisms. They had been resident in their network for over 300 days. That is what you can do with behavioral analytics.
Thank you. Ariel, go ahead.
So I want to just add something. So if I could say do one thing, it would be to implement multi-factor authentication when it's available or when it becomes available. I think it's one of the most important aspects for keeping folks out of your network. We have seen just recently, again, Russia tried to bypass two-factor authentication. And of course, advanced persistent threats will try to do that as well. But research does show that 99% of the time, multi-factor authentication is effective at keeping the attackers out so that you don't have an accessible account. But also, like anything, it's vulnerable. And since attackers know that this is a secure method, they're going to try to exploit it. So be sure to review your configurations of multi-factor authentication as you start to implement it, and also just changing defaults.
Thank you. And Chris?
And we, as I mentioned earlier, keeping that open collaborative relationship with being compliant with the CISA guidelines, with HHS department level, with the CISO's office, as well as with the CMS CISO's office, and with all of our vendors that we work with, that we're using their products with, as well as our contractor who has the responsibility for the operations and maintenance of our applications. And again, I did just highlight the example I used with SolarWinds, having that immediate correspondence attention that we received and worked with for that 4-day plan until when they came in on that Thursday, and then executed against that playbook. That's the way we're learning from that. And as Bruce mentioned earlier, regarding the training and the culture. Don't create that fear that you cannot bring something forward. We can keep the information flowing freely, not going to hide anything. We're very transparent. And we want to make sure that the software vendors and our contractors are also transparent, because if they're hiding something, we're not going to know about it. And I don't know if one of my monitoring tools will find it. The people will come forward with information.
Thanks, Chris. Go ahead, William.
I was gonna say, and even in this space, DOE, OCIO has stood up a program for, a lot of the supply chain risk management monitoring and analysis of new tools and products we're bringing into the department. So we have, an entire program inside of our CISO's shop that is looking specifically at that, right? If we bring in this tool, what is it, what might it be connected to? What might other things, what might be some of the risk factors involved? Where's it manufactured? Where's the software coded? Who's coding it? Is it open source? Is it not? Things like that. So we have an entire program internally that, we have a lot of great folks that are doing this work, and they're partnered up with industry and others to make sure that it's happening. And so for us, we're looking not only at ourselves, but we're looking, our labs are coming to us and saying, hey, how can we use this? How can we pivot off that? And how can we make sure that we're buying what works best for us? Because we don't want something to be, to actually have that, a built-in, something, like going back to SolarWinds. Jesus, my mind is not working well today. Going back to SolarWinds, we don't want a built-in piece of, an update code, or going even into NotPetya, when it crashed the Ukrainian tax software. We don't want that type of attack to come in and hurt the United States, or especially the United States energy sector.
Absolutely. So in the interest of time, I see we have a couple of questions that have come through, but we'll send these to our panelists so that they can respond through email if they would like to. That way we don't have to rush their responses. Or Chris, I see you're typing up an answer. You can go ahead and answer it that way if you would like. But I definitely want to give you guys each adequate amount of time to share with us your closing thoughts and what it is that you want to leave our audience with. So maybe something that you really want them to take away from this discussion above anything else, though I know we covered a lot of topics. But we'll just go around and we'll start with Ariel, please.
Okay, so my last words, I really appreciate the opportunity again. I would say a lot of these attacks that we talked about today, they were from Russian state actors, even as the one that was just mentioned by William, NotPetya, that's also Russian attack. So with that, please visit our CISA.gov/shields-up page. There is guidance on what steps you can take immediately right now to kind of be proactive just in case anything happens. And again, that's CISA.gov/shields-up.
Excellent. Thank you, Ariel. And we'll move over to Chris next.
So in closing, I always talk about because we deal with systems, and every system has unique processes that they have to be followed, one has to follow, and we have people. So take that backwards, we have people, processes, and technology. And it goes in line with trying to answer the question online, Andre Fraser. Having the fine equilibrium between people, processes, and technology. As technology evolves and changes, the processes have to evolve and change as well. So those processes have to be updated and changed because the technology changes and has to be upgraded because vulnerabilities are introduced for security monitoring and or new software upgrades, not just for security reasons, but because of functionality or technical issues or whatever it may be. And the people overseeing that or using it, your customers, we have to keep them updated and trained as well. So finding that fine equilibrium and that balance is very critical, because you can have the best technology out there, but if you don't have anybody who can actually use it or knows how to use it, and you don't have the processes or you don't in the communication channels to be able to communicate what this is going to do for you, what the benefits are going to be, it's useless and nobody's going to use it. So that equilibrium is extremely important, and you can only have that when you have this kind of a transparency, as well as making sure when you're introducing something, you keep an open, transparent communication channel, and you keep all of your pieces, the people, process, technology in sync.
Well said, Chris. Thank you. Thank you. And we will hear from William next.
So I mean, I guess I don't have much time, but in closing, this has been it's been a great panel to discuss with Chris and Ariel and Bruce on everything. It really does highlight, as Ariel said, the people, the processes, everything else. It all comes into one. It's all one big, network, if you would, of information moving through. And going to something Bruce said earlier, cyberspace and IT is the only man-made domain of warfare where we created it. It is 100% of what we make it out to be, and it's only going to be secure as we can make it ourselves. So yeah.
Wonderful. And Bruce, we'll have you close us out.
I speak with organizations that'll frequently tell me we're too small to use these advanced technologies, and I'm going to tell you, the smaller you are, the fewer people you have, the more you need to be looking at things like automation. Stuff like that will become the wind beneath your wings. It becomes in the military parlance a force multiplier. It gives you a chance to do work that you're batting above your weight. And when you use that technology efficiently, it can become that force multiplier.
Well said. Well, thank you all so much. I also want to give a special thanks to our partners again at Palo Alto Networks and you all at home for tuning in. Great questions from the audience. So our next big event, I'm so excited. I'm flying home to Virginia for this from Florida, is our GuideTech conference. This is a 3-day technology conference in Annapolis, Maryland. You don't want to miss it. It starts this Sunday. I really hope I see you all there. So it begins May 1st and it's a 3-day event. Please scan the QR code on your screen, or you can go ahead and visit ATARC's website to register. I put the link to it in the chat. Definitely register and share this with your network because it's going to be huge. People are going to be talking about this for months, so you don't want to miss it. And also, last, before logging off, please remember to fill out this poll question on whether or not you would like your CPE credit certificate emailed to you. So I think maybe that already popped up on the screen and I missed it. Anyways, I really hope to see you all in Annapolis, or at least at some of these future in-person events as we start to get back at it again. And everyone have a great rest of your week. Bye.